Hi there. In this video, I would be teaching you the difference between the RAM and the ROM. Now, before we start with that, let us discuss what is RAM. Again, we must know that what does the RAM stands for before we know what is RAM. So, the RAM stands for is random access memory. Yes, it is random access memory, RAM. Now, coming back to our main question, which is what is RAM? So, we can say that the RAM is a device used to store the programs and data used by the CPU in real time. Like this video being watched uses some CPU data stored in the RAM, but it is a volatile memory, which means the data stored in the RAM evaporates the moment we cut the power supply, and the data on the RAM can be read, written, and erased any number of times by the computer or the CPU. Now, since we know what is RAM, so the next question that we shall be discussing is what is ROM? But first, we must know that what does the ROM stands for. So the ROM stands for is read only memory. Yes, it is read only memory. Now let's come back to our main question, that is what is ROM? So ROM is a device used to store firmware for the hardware which hardly or rarely gets any update. For instance, the BIOS update. But it is a non-volatile memory, which means that it doesn't forget the data even if the power supply is removed, while for RAM it forgets the data if the power supply is removed. Now, the data on the ROM can only be read by the computer any number of times, but for RAM it can be read, written, and erased any number of times by the computer or the CPU. So, this takes us to the motto of the video, which is the difference between them. That is the difference between the RAM and the ROM. So let's see the difference step by step. So the first point of the difference we shall be discussing is data. So the data for the RAM is not permanent, but that for the ROM is permanent. So leading to the second point of the discussion, the second point will be of speed. So the speed for the RAM is a very high speed memory device, but the ROM is much slower than the RAM. Now coming to the third point of the difference, which is the CPU interactions of RAM and ROM. For RAM, the data stored can be accessed by the CPU, but the data stored in the ROM cannot be accessed by the CPU. In fact, the data in the ROM has to be first transferred to the RAM to be accessed by the CPU. Now, the fourth point comes to size and capacity. For RAM, larger the size, higher will be the capacity, and for ROM, has small size and less capacity. Leading to the fifth point, that is usage. So, what memory does RAM and ROM uses? So, RAM uses the primary memory and CPU cache memory, while ROM uses firmware like BIOS or UEFI, RFID tags, microcontrollers, and at places where a permanent memory solution is required. Now, discussing the last and the most important point of the difference, that is the cost of RAM and ROM. Yes, the cost of RAM and ROM is a point to be discussed always. So RAM having so many benefits surely tells us that it won't be cheap, while the ROM is way cheaper than RAM. Thank you for watching the video.